Hi, I'm back again. What I wanted to talk to you today is about my personal story because you might be wondering, why am I so passionate about speaking about sugar? And it's because I wasn't always like this. I was so addicted to sugar. I couldn't go a day without having to have it, even though I kept saying I want to lose weight, and I was joining all the kind of Weight Watchers, Slimming World, whatever there was, and I just couldn't stop eating the sugar. I just couldn't do it. I was so addicted to the sugar. But at the time, I was really unhappy because I was in a really unhappy marriage, and quite a destructive, violent marriage. So I found myself slipping from being this really confident young woman living in London. I was teaching during the day, partying at night, and I was such a confident young girl. And then I got married, and it was so destructive, and it really did impact me completely in a negative way. I became a shadow of myself, and I just became such an emotional eater. So I would be every night eating this kind of Maltesers or Pringles, whatever, and I really didn't care at that time because I was so unhappy. My confidence was so low, and to me, it was comfort, and I enjoyed it. It gave me a moment of release. But obviously, after a while, do you realise sometimes that you've gone to the cupboard and you've got some biscuits out. You think, oh, I'm going to sit down and enjoy these biscuits. I'm going to sit down, enjoy with a drink, and I'm going to watch whatever. And then I'd sit down and think, where did I put those biscuits? And then they're like, oh, I must have ate them. Didn't even realise, didn't enjoy them, didn't manage to savour that moment. And so I'd go back and get some more. And I would do it, and before you knew it, I cleared the whole, you know, biscuits. And then I was racked with guilt, shame, embarrassment. And I can remember going on the weighing scales and thinking, oh, only 2 pounds, and I go up to the next level. It was such a destructive way of thinking. And I just couldn't, I just felt so old. I had two really young children. My Noah, I think, was only about 18 months old, and my daughter would have been about 4. And I just wrapped myself into being a mum. And at that time, a yummy mummy had come out, and I just felt like a yucky mummy. And I can remember the kids saying to me, "Mummy, you're so fat," and like, you know what children do. And I just thought that was it, that I'd given up on myself. I didn't really care. I never bought nice clothes, never really went out, and I'd not, I wasn't looking after my body, wasn't looking after myself at all. I had like a destructive relationship with food and myself. And then something happened which was my huge catalyst. Unfortunately, my lovely dad, who I loved so much, suddenly died. He had an accident and got rushed to hospital, and he had developed something called PSP, which is under the umbrella of Parkinson's, but it kind of shuts down the brain. And it was a horrible way to see somebody that you love die. But it was a big wake-up call for me because it made me realise that life could be taken at any time, and that I wasn't living mine. I wasn't living my true self. What I was doing was I was just existing. I wasn't happy. I knew that at that moment I had to change everything. So I got some help, divorced the husband, moved from where I was living down in Brighton, and moved back to my hometown to be near my mum, who obviously was just so upset with what had happened with losing my dad. And we supported each other, and we the children loved being near Nana, and Nana loved being with them. And I really changed my whole relationship with food. And I even changed my relationship with my job. I was a primary school teacher, but it was never giving me the enjoyment or satisfaction. And so, because I became engrossed in nutrition again, I'd always been passionate with nutrition before I got married, and suddenly I'd found this passion again, and I was really wanting to heal myself. And the first thing I was thinking about is that I wanted to lose the weight. But because I was studying the nutrition and I became aware about sugars, I and there been such a dramatic change that I just cut it out that day. Um, and over a period of time, I just felt so much better. It wasn't long before the weight shifted off me. My confidence came back. I was straight away feeling like all my gut issues. I had irritable bowel syndrome. I had rashes on my skin, and I just felt awful. But my irritable bowel syndrome cleared up. My, my skin started to feel and look better. I didn't have those dry, scaly patches anymore. And then I started to add in all the good nutrition. And before you knew it, people were asking me, what have you done? What have you done differently? And so I started to do Truth About Sugar workshops. And by this time, I was a certified health coach. I was a nutritional therapist. I really embraced myself down the whole nutrition road. And I was doing just these little workshops in my local area to educate people about what I was doing and how much it helped me. And then before you knew it, these came quite, like I started to be called the sugar woman, even though I'd called myself the wellness catalyst because of the catalyst that I felt had happened after my dad had died. But everyone would say, oh, the sugar woman's here, sugar woman's here. So I ended up buying that name and became the sugar woman. And the Cabinet Office phoned me, Cabinet Office in London phoned me and asked for some advice about sugar. And so before you knew it, I was on a train down to London to meet the research team at the Cabinet Office who wanted to hear my workshop. And it just gave me that huge confidence from being that woman who'd been so tiny and lost of confidence and not knowing what I was good at or what I was passionate at or who I could help or what I was going to do. Suddenly at the Cabinet Office advising them about sugar, and I've been doing that ever since. So that was in 2012 I went to the Cabinet Office, and they chose to do the sugar tax. It wasn't my advice. My advice was that I think that they should have reduced tax on fruit and veg and given cooking lessons throughout the land to get people back into enjoying cooking in the kitchen. But instead they chose the sugar tax. Now, not a big massive fan of it myself, because in 2020 this year they've got to kind of show how that impacted the UK. And we know that people have still got diabetes, they're still going through the roof. And what's happened instead, obviously the food industry have had to respond by reducing sugar in their ingredients by 20%. But what they're doing is obviously reducing it, but replacing it with artificial sweeteners. And artificial sweeteners are just chemicals, aren't they? And it's not the best route to go down. And a lot of people will know certain artificial sweeteners are worse than others, like aspartame is so toxic to the body. It's been linked to brain cancer, been linked to Alzheimer's, it's been linked to Parkinson's, but it still finds its way into the ingredients list. But lots of people know that aspartame is bad. You will find it in things like Coca-Cola, in a lot of the fizzy drinks, aspartame. But if you're really like wanting to kind of look at your ingredients list and realize that you don't really want these kind of ingredients in your food, you will start to notice that the food industry again can change the words. So instead of calling it aspartame, it can be listed as E951. Now, E951 means aspartame. So if you're looking in your ingredients, you see E951 because it's not something that you're going to be looking for. It is obviously aspartame. It's toxic. It's not good for your body at all. And they can call it NutraSweet, which makes it sound like it's a small, cute, little, friendly ingredient, but it's not. So yeah, so my personal story, that is why I am passionate about helping people to shift their focus and to shift the sugar out of their system. Now, I know so many people struggle with it because sugar is addictive, isn't it? And that's why, previously I'd never been able to shift the sugar out of my life because I was addicted. I just couldn't go a day without having it. And I suppose sometimes we have such a wake-up call that that's our snap out of something. We've got to get to the bottom before we can climb up. But I don't really want that for you. I don't want it to get to the point where you're feeling so bad about yourself that that's the only way out of it, or for you to get a chronic disease where you then are forced to kind of shift the sugar out of your life. So something else I've developed over the years, I really became fascinated with the subconscious mind, really trying to understand, how people repeat habits and behaviors even though that they know that it doesn't serve them. And so through that, I became a hypnotherapist. And hypnotherapy is so fantastic for shifting ingrained behaviors that you repeat day and day and day, even though you don't really want to do it anymore. And by just focusing on reprogramming your thoughts, reprogramming your subconscious mind, it's not scary. Hypnosis is not like they do on these TV programs where it is all stage, where they get people to bark like dogs or, do silly things on the stage. That is not what hypnosis is. Hypnosis is friendly, it's kind, it's not about restriction. Diets to me, the word diet just means to me restriction. It's a short period of time that you're restricting yourself from eating a certain type of food. Sugar, maybe, for example. But with my clients, what I do is to help them to not have to rely on willpower. Willpower is something that we know is something that we have to kind of fight to win, and then we sabotage that, and then we feel bad about ourselves, and we can have shame and we can have guilt and feel bad about ourselves for not having strong enough willpower. But to me, we don't need to rely on willpower if we reprogram the way that you think, which will reprogram the way that you behave, which will reprogram the way that you eat, or whatever it is that you are contemplating on changing. So I'll talk more about that tomorrow, but I just wanted to be honest with you and to let you know that sugar was always a huge problem for me. And then I must also be completely truthful with you, because 2 years ago my mum was run over. So my mum, who you remember we'd kind of, now we're like so close because she'd lost my dad, I'd divorced my partner, and so we kind of became such good friends. And then she developed cancer, but while she had the cancer, she was doing so well. It was growing so slowly. I was looking after her, advising her what to eat, and putting her on really good supplements to kind of, and activators to make sure her body was giving her the best that she could have. And but then one day she was coming away from hospital, and I always used to take her. I drove her there, waited for her, and brought her home. And that day I couldn't, and she was going for the bus to come home, and somebody was speeding around the roundabout, took her, instead of going where they'd indicated to go, they drove into my mum, and she was hit, thrown up in the air, landed on her head, and had a bleed on the brain. Imagine getting that phone call from the police to tell me to get to the hospital as soon as I could because my mum had a serious brain injury. I, I don't know how I managed to get there, but luckily she didn't die that day. But because of the shock and the trauma to her body, the cancer just seemed to rush through her body, and I did lose her. And I must admit, at that time, my emotional eating habits came back. I started to sabotage myself. I started to eat the sugar, and I could no longer felt that I was aligned to my message of being the sugar woman, because there I was talking to people advising about it, but eating it myself. And I'd slipped back into those habits of sabotaging my health. So then I had to work on myself. I did the hypnotherapy with myself. I did the kind of whole repairing myself. And I can tell you completely, I'm completely aligned back to my message now. It was a period of about a year that I just was in grief. And obviously, I'm not going to beat myself up about something which is a natural reaction to something so traumatic, isn't it? But it did impact me. It did make me feel lousy. It did make me feel like I put loads of weight on again. And obviously by then I'd gone through the menopause and struggled to shift that weight back off. But I am completely back on my message, and I love leading other women through my programs to help them to tame their sugar monster, I call it, and to give them that chance of having a sweeter life. So anyway, I will see you tomorrow on our next video. Bye for now.